Hello, friends. Welcome to the world of English literature. My name is Amit, and today I have with me Arzu, who's a research scholar. And today we'll discuss this poem called For Anne Gregory by William Butler Yeats, which is in your book First Flight, chapter 10 for class 10. So, Arzu, we are going to do this poem by William Butler Yeats, who's one of the foremost writers of 20th century, a dramatist, a poet, a prose writer, Nobel Prize winner, pride of Ireland, pride of the whole world, let's say, a very philosophical man along with being a poetic man. So let's start with a recitation of the poem.
Yeah.
For Anne Gregory. Never shall a young man, thrown into despair by those great honey colored ramparts at your ear, love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair.
But I can get a hair dye and set such color there, brown or black or carrot, that young men in despair may love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair.
I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. Now let us listen to a musical rendition of this poem by this person called Steve the Balladier.
Never shall a young man thrown into despair by those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. But I can get a hair dye and set such color there, brown or black or carrot, that young men in despair may love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair. I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair.
That was a lovely rendition of the poem. It really brought out the lyricality of it. What do you think?
Indeed, Yeats is known to be very lyrical, and in fact, he used to keep humming his tunes all day long while writing. So that's what many of his friends said later on about his renditions. So he always had it, it in mind as a musical thing, all his poetry. So let us go over some difficult words in the poem. It's a fairly easy poem with a very lucid sort of vocabulary, and which is also the hallmark of a good poet, to keep it simple. The best poets keep it simple, but there are a couple of important words over here, which are
Rampart is one. So, would you like to talk about the word?
so rampart is fortification, like the walls of the Red Fort. So the walls around to keep enemies away is rampart. It comes from Latin roots re and imperare. Re, as you have seen with many words, is again, and imperare in Latin is fortify or to take possession of. So to re-fortify or to take possession of something again is the original idea of rampart, and so you take possession of your property by building a wall around it. So here let us look at those lines. Never shall a young man thrown into despair by those great honey colored ramparts at your ear. So here rampart, the hair is being compared to the rampart, as if the girl Anne Gregory is the castle and is protected by her hair, which is the walls of the fortress.
Yeah.
That is the connotation over here, and so that is an important metaphor to remember here. The other word here is despair. Would you like to throw some light upon it? What do you
Yeah.
think despair is?
So, a very common clarification of despair or meaning of despair is hopelessness, total loss of hope. Despair naturally destroys courage and stops all effort, but may produce a new kind of courage and fierce activity founded upon the sense that there is nothing worse to be feared. In this, despair is akin to desperation, which is an active state and always tends to produce a furious struggle against adverse circumstances, even when the situation is utterly hopeless.
Right. Have you ever despaired?
I think all our students have as well, and everyone who's alive comes with this curse of despair. So.
Arzu, you've raised a very important point of despair and how all of us go through despair in our life, and it's a real test of our mettle, of what our inner strength is. And students face this a lot these days because of the stress of entrance exams, the stress of peer pressures, the stress of career, and many things, and especially during this time of COVID, having to deal with a lot of online stuff and being isolated, being inside the home. It's a very stressful time, but that's the point, to not despair and be aware about mental health and also seek help.
Yeah.
It's not a taboo. If one feels anxious or depressed, one should reach out to one's loved ones or to professionals.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Alright, so let's jump into a close reading of the poem. As Sir already explained, the entire poem is in dialogue format, and there are 3 stanzas where the first and the last stanza are assumed to be spoken by a man, and the middle one is considered to be the reply that Anne Gregory has for the man. Let's jump to the first paragraph now. Never shall a young man thrown into despair by those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. So what it's trying to say is that never shall a young man, so it will never happen that a young man will be thrown into despair because of who you are yourself. So a man's affection towards Anne Gregory, there is a claim here that the affection would only be based upon her outer appearance, only based on her beauty, only based on her golden hair, and not for who she really is, not for her personality. And right in the very first line, we see the word young man come here. So again, the entire poem deals with this heterosexual affection and claims that it is purely based on a superficial level and it does not penetrate deeper into her heart, does not penetrate deeper into her personality. So do you think the word rampart here then signifies a lot more than what we discussed earlier?
Definitely does. So, if you look at these lines, a young man thrown into despair by those great honey colored ramparts at your ear. So, it's a whole fortification imagery. This young man is thrown off a fortress by these ramparts, which are her yellow colored hair, which is hiding her soul, so to say. And the hair is the rampart from which a young man is thrown into despair because he is hopeless he's in love with this girl because of her yellow hair. So to say, love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair, which is the operative part of this stanza, that the narrator here is saying, or people would assume the poet is saying, that a young man who falls in love with his a girl with honey colored yellow hair will not fall in love with her for what she is intrinsically worth, but for her outer beauty, outward appearance. That attraction is vital to love, is what the message of this first stanza is, or what this person who's speaking the first stanza is saying. So he's making a statement that we do not know the intrinsic worth, that young men fall in love only for beauty, for outward appearance, attraction, etc.
So, do you think there is an assumption here that this love is purely carnal and not anything beyond that?
Well, it is in the romantic tradition of 19th century, where one would not go so far as to say it's carnal love, because romantic poetry relies a lot on nature imagery, celebrating it, and so it at least poses to be very sweet and connected to natural elements, rather than using a word like carnal over here.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Let's look at the next stanza.
But I can get a hair dye and set such color there, brown or black or carrot, that young men in despair may love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair. So that is Anne Gregory's reply to this person's claim that anyone who loves you would only love you for your beauty and not for your heart. And so she questions that my beauty is transient, perhaps, or my beauty is something that can be changed. So, what if I change my hair color? What if I put hair dye, change my yellow hair into brown or black or carrot? And what then? Would these men still love me? Or could this perhaps be a test to see who really loves me for my heart and who loves me for my yellow hair? So there is this sort of challenge to this assumption that what if I change my hair? What if I'm able to exercise my agency by changing this one part about me?
Yeah. And it's a metaphor for much deeper things. It's a metaphor for racism. If instead of the hair color, it's body color, then you can see brown or black or carrot. If the girl was from a different race, if she was Afro American, or if she was from the Near East or Far East, how would the perception change? How we build, how racism has been so ingrained in our social lives for a very, very long time. So here, instead of hair, think about other things, body color. I'll tell you a very interesting novel by Wilkie Collins, who's a very famous novelist in 19th century. So in one of his novels, there is a plot in which there is a young, handsome British man and his British girlfriend, both white people, and then the man goes through some disease. The girl is blind, by the way, so she has never seen him, but they are in love. So the man has to go through a mercury treatment in which he turns black, and the girl breaks up with him. She does not know, she is blind from birth, she does not know what black or white is, but she falls out of love with him when she hears that he is no longer white and he is black. So that's precisely the point that Anne Gregory is making over here. What if my hair color was brown or black or carrot? Would these men still love me? Will they love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair? So, do men care for intrinsic worth for the person I am, or do they just care about the outward experience? So, it is a protest by Anne Gregory. It is a protest of a woman against this idea of love that has been framed by men, by patriarchy for many centuries.
It's very interesting, sir, how different colors could mean a lot more than just the hair color here, and how black and brown and yellow could be symbols for something that goes much beyond just her hair color. And it's also interesting that Yeats is also considered to be a post colonial writer, considering that he did write about the British invasion in Ireland and he did comment about the entire politics of British colonialism and British influence on Ireland. Of course, their race is more homogeneous to say than in other areas. But how do you think that affects our reading of the poem? Yeats as a post-colonial commentator.
It's very important because Ireland fought against England for freedom, and Yeats was also an Irish nationalist. So that's a little bit background about Yeats. His girlfriend or his love interest, Maud Gonne, was an active politician, and she would not agree to his proposal for marriage because he was not an active politician, so to say. But of course, he was highly influenced by the movement, and he understood what colonialism is. And colonialism is the rule of one country over another, like British rule over India. And similarly, the British rule over Irish people, also the rule of white people over white people. But you can see the nuances over here, the finer point over here, with the brown and black in the carrot hair, because as you have seen in Hollywood films as well, it is the blonde hair which is preferred for the stars, for the heroines. And in fact, you would be very interested to learn, Arzu, that there's a big hair industry that runs in the world, hair industry of wigs, where Afro-American women in America wear wigs of straight hair because they would not get employment if they have frizzy hair or wild hair and things like that. And so these wigs come very costly. And so hair is more than just an innocent metaphor like we are looking at this poem.
Yeah, so I think it really impacts your acceptance as a woman, the beauty standards that the world subjects you to, and how you have to either take a stand for yourself and rebel against all of that, or perhaps conform to all of this in hope for acceptance, in hope for love. And how Anne Gregory here is questioning that conformity. Anne Gregory here is taking a stand that what if I change my outer beauty? What if I don't conform to the beauty standards? Which is also interesting considering you brought up Maud Gonne and how she was also a figure of rebellion. She was also this female figure who wanted to question the society, who wanted to not conform, who wanted to rebel. And in this stanza, I could almost hear Maud Gonne speak through Anne Gregory.
Definitely. Yeats proposed 3 times to Maud Gonne, and he was rejected all 3 times. Be interested to know. But this also tying into the whole question of racism, etc., is very relevant, students and friends, to think about the issue of racism, how deeply ingrained it is in our society, how we endorse beauty products, fairness creams, how our superstars have endorsed fairness creams, because it is ingrained in our psyche that fair is better, which is a very unfair assumption. And so we have to be very aware of these issues. However, let's move to the third stanza now. I heard an old religious man by yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. So here the narrator of the poem brings in a third party. So this is the third character. Actually, there are 4 characters. The young man who falls in love with the girl who replies, this religious man who finds a text to prove something, but above all these is the narrator who may not be the man in the first stanza. So this is also something while reading in future also with other texts, do not friends confuse the writer with the narrator. The person who is speaking in the text is necessarily not the writer. So these views may or may not be of William Butler Yeats, which is further distanced by including another character now, this religious old man. So let's go over this stanza. I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear. So the narrator is talking about an old religious man who yesterday night found some text and he declared that only God could love you for yourself alone, addressing the girl, Anne Gregory. So it is not in human capability to love you for yourself alone, for your qualities alone. Human beings, the men who are falling in despair, will fall in despair because of your eyes, your hair, because of your smile, or some other quality. It is not within human understanding to not be attracted and love. That is the point that the old man is making, and he says that he has found a text, a religious text, to prove this point. So, eventually, tying up these three paragraphs, we see that in the first one, the narrator, the speaker of the first stanza, says that a young man cannot help but falling in love with this girl's yellow hair. So it's also very romantic in nature, very sweet, but at the same time also making a point that how can one not fall in love with those beautiful yellow hair, and you yourself alone. The second stanza, the girl protests that um, she does not like this idea. What if her hair color was different? What if she had different physical attributes? Would that be a disadvantage? And in the third stanza, we see the narrator quoting a religious man from a text. So it is three times removed. There's a writer, there's a narrator, there's a religious man who's read in a book and declaring. So this is how also information or ideas are carried forward or diluted. And in that text, it is said that it is only in God's ability to love someone for what they are, to love selflessly, without any strings attached, and which is why the poet here says, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. So that is roughly the poem, that only God can love human beings for what they are. Human beings love human beings with some conditions, and this is at the heart of the debate of this poem. So in the last two lines, the poet says, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. So it's only within God's ability to love people for what they are, for their intrinsic ability, selflessly, not for humans to do that, because humans work through comparisons with each other. Thanks a lot for being with us. Thank you, Arzu.
Thank you.